Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News Weekend. A Senate Committee on Human Rights heard the painful stories of a group of Indigenous women Monday night. The women are survivors of forced sterilization. APTN's Fraser Needham has more.
There are no words to describe the violation and powerlessness of having your cultural identity as a woman essentially sterilized.
This terrifying experience left a void inside of me. I felt no longer a woman, and I am terrified of hospitals and doctors. I didn't say anything to anybody because I thought no one would believe me.
I felt empty with my maternal instinct and God-given ability to bear life cut and ripped from me.
These are just a few snapshots of the horrific stories shared by Indigenous women who were forced into sterilization against their will by hospital staff and social services workers. The women told the Senate committee the sterilization was done without consultation or choice, usually just after they had given birth and were most vulnerable, with scars lasting a lifetime. Witness Morningstar Mercury told the committee countless Indigenous people have been subject to forced sterilization for generations.
It is my opinion that we will never adequately be able to determine the numbers of women and men, girls and boys that were sterilized in residential schools and in Indian hospitals.
Senator Kim Pate said the stories she heard meet the test for criminal prosecution.
In this case, my hearing of what you've described already violated criminal law. You were assaulted. You were sexually assaulted. It was also contrary to the medical codes of the doctors and nurses, all the medical professionals. It violated your human rights, and yet there's been no accountability.
A 2021 Senate report recommended a House of Commons committee further study this issue, with the goal of finding solutions to stop the practice. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
This past Thursday was Red Dress Day, a national day for awareness for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and two-spirited people. Rallies and walks were held throughout the country, including Manitoba's capital city. Our Daryl Stranger starts off our coverage.
Events around Manitoba's capital city kicked off with dozens gathering outside Winnipeg City Hall to commemorate Red Dress Day. Families and survivors were on hand to raise awareness on the issue and participate in song and prayer. Sisters Kim McPherson and Jerry Pangman lost their sister and aunt to violence.
Well, for me, it's very important to keep raising awareness and to let people know that our loved ones were loved. They were beautiful human beings that once walked here, that they are someone, and to keep being my sister's voice, my auntie's voice, because there's so much that women are still going missing, so we still need a lot of work to be done.
McPherson hopes with days like today, more people can learn about the issues that are still ongoing.
Today is why I like participating, is to remind everybody that this is not just an Indigenous issue, this is a whole society issue. It's an issue that I hope Canadians champion and walk with us. Walk with us families to try to find justice and also to prevent this from happening again.
A large gathering then congregated near Manitoba's legislature before walking to the Odena Circle in the Forks, where more song and prayer took place. Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
To Calgary now, where red dresses and ribbons were hung throughout the city for Red Dress Day. Hundreds gathered there to remember loved ones. APTN's Tamara Pimentel was there and has this report.
The event in Calgary took place along Memorial Drive, where the dismembered remains of Blackfoot woman Joey English were found in 2016. Today, the entire area covered in red to remember her and hundreds of other Indigenous women taken too soon.
Red is the color that the spirits see. So when we wear red for MMIWG, we're calling in those spirits of our loved ones to come join us for the day in a good way, so that we can honor them and remember them and know that they are loved and never forgotten.
Deborah Green Gopher organized the gathering while honoring her sister Lainey.
She was murdered in 1982 by a Starlight tour here outside of Calgary, and so my family and I have been advocating for many years for the movement. Her murder was never investigated or solved.
Green Gopher says police were asked to not attend this event because of the history of police violence toward Indigenous people.
We did have 2 police officers show up earlier. We had to ask them to leave in a respectful way, not them as people, but the uniform that they represent. You know, they were welcome to join us without their uniform. It's very trauma triggering for a lot of families that are coming today to heal.
With performances from the Blackfoot Confederacy Drum Group and a teepee from Calgary's Bear Clan, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls like Joey and Lainey aren't forgotten.
Anytime I speak or walk or march or arrange gatherings, it's always in her name, and she always comes every time.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
Earlier in the week, the House of Commons held a 4-hour debate on murdered and missing women, where the federal government was grilled about its response to the 231 calls to justice from the MMIWG final report. The Liberal government is asking for patience, but as Fraser Needham reports, opposition parties say victims and families of gender violence don't have time to wait.
Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Mark Miller acknowledged the problem Thursday.
We're failing as a country, and to the extent that responsibility falls in part on the federal government, we have to look at it through that lens.
At the same time, he says seriously tackling MMIWG's calls for justice won't happen overnight.
This is something that it's not an excuse for an action to say it won't get solved overnight, but if you think it can be solved overnight, you're kind of misunderstanding the gravity of the situation. So these are investments that can't be measured in one budgetary cycle. The investments in housing in the current budget will make a difference, particularly in the far north. The investments that are seen through the lens of reducing gender violence will make a difference.
The NDP's Leah Gazan says victims and families of violence have been patient long enough and can't wait any longer for results.
I'd like him to say that to families who are looking for loved ones at the moment, survivors of violence that are not getting support, and women, girls, and Two-Spirit trying to flee violence. I think asking them to be patient, asking anybody who's dealing with this ongoing genocide to be patient is unacceptable.
Conservative MP Gary Vidal is a critic for Crown Indigenous Relations. He says because the Liberals have fallen so short on their promises on MMIWG, they run the risk of breaking the public trust. Something he says is desperately needed when it comes to relations with Indigenous people.
They typically have overpromised and underdelivered on so many things, right? There's lots of announcements, there's lots of photo ops, there's lots of promises, but they end up being a little short on kind of getting it done. And so, maybe that's a transition in strategy to say, hey, let's be careful that we stop this over-promising and under-delivering, because the ultimate consequence of that is that trust is lost with people, right?
Last year, the government released its National Action Plan on MMIWG with 7 priority areas. At Wednesday night's debate, Miller told the House his department will have an update on progress on these priority areas next month. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
To the West Coast now, where a grandfather and his 14-year-old granddaughter have reached a settlement with the Bank of Montreal after they were handcuffed over 2 years ago at a branch in Vancouver. In December 2019, Maxwell Johnson wanted to open an account for his granddaughter. A bank worker instead called police because they had, quote, fraudulent Indian status cards. Today, Maxwell Johnson closed his account with Heilsa Nation members outside the bank to show their support. Johnson and his granddaughter will receive an undisclosed payment from the bank. BMO will take part in a private apology ceremony and will also display art created by Johnson at the branch where they were handcuffed.
It's been a long process with BMO, but I'm glad it's coming to an end, and I hope nobody else of color has to go through this themselves. It's not only hard on my family, but it's hard on our culture, our people. They felt what I was going through too, not only me, but my son and my granddaughter. So I just hope nobody else has to go through this with any big corporations like this.
An inquiry into the child welfare system has kicked off. More on that coming up after the break. Welcome back. The Senate Committee on Aboriginal Peoples heard from witnesses about sexual discrimination within the Indian Act this past week. Bill S3 and its amendments were supposed to eliminate sexual discrimination from it. But the committee heard from witness Jeremy Matson. He was initially denied status because his grandmother married a non-status man. Because of amendments, Matson was able to gain status, and so have his children. But they won't be able to pass on status if they marry non-Indigenous people.
The Section 6.2 generation cutoff rule, it is genocidal in nature. It's assimilative. It violates all of Canada's international obligations. It violates Articles 8, 9 of UNDRIP. It violates Article 30 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And the list goes on.
Well, it was delayed by the COVID pandemic, but Newfoundland and Labrador has officially launched its inquiry into Innu children in provincial care. It was called after 3 youth took their own lives in 2017. As Angel Moore reports, the Innu Nation says the child welfare system simply doesn't work.
Wally Rich of the Natwashish Innu Nation was only 15 years old and in provincial care when he took his own life 2 years ago. Wally's mother, Nympha Rich, was too upset to speak on camera, but sent APTN News a text message saying the system has been failing and, "I lost my son because of their system. He was in care for many years, and I always got told my boys are safe and you don't have to worry about it. That's what they always said." The Innu Nation includes the Sheshashi and Natwashish communities, are north of Happy Valley Goose Bay. Innu children placed in provincial care are often removed from their communities, which may be to another province. Innu Nation Grand Chief Etienne Rich says culture and language are lost.
They come back home after for several years, and then they don't have that language. They couldn't even communicate with their grandparents. That's a sad thing about it.
Innu leaders hope to find answers through this inquiry.
The system doesn't work for us, and has gone for so many years been like that. And I think it's time to change, and I think to identify what exactly the problems are.
A press release said the 3 commissioners will focus on systemic causes of mistreatment, cultural and community impacts. They'll meet with Innu leadership to discuss the needs of Innu families and investigate individual cases of youth who've lost their lives. Grand Chief Rich is looking forward to working with the commissioners.
We've been saying that for so many decades that the system doesn't work for the Innu, and we're the ones who will tell you what's best for the Innu, because we're the ones who know. We're the ones who live in this system, doesn't work, and hurting our people and our elders.
The government of Newfoundland and Labrador is funding the inquiry $4 million, and it will take 18 months to complete. Hearings may begin next fall. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabotuk, also known as Halifax.
Unprecedented data from Statistics Canada illuminates Canada's transgender and non-binary population. It's the first time the National Household Survey has differentiated between sex at birth and gender in the census. Our reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs spoke with LGBTQ2S+ Northerners for insight into what the numbers may mean for the community.
For the first time ever, transgender and non-binary Canadians have a space in Statistics Canada census data. New data released from 2021's collections show of the nearly 30.5 million people in Canada aged 15 and over living in a private household, just under 60,000 identify as transgender or non-binary. Theo Grandjam, a transgender man from Yellowknife, says it's a step towards inclusion.
Filling out the census, seeing my own box there was definitely very validating to me. I didn't quite agree with just having the non-binary because there's so many other genders. There's agender, bigender, people who aren't non-binary, but they have to put that because all of those genders are getting thrown under that umbrella.
In recent years, there's been movement federally towards protection of LGBTQ2S+ communities.
An act to amend the Canadian Human Rights Act and Criminal Code that would ensure that Canadians will be free to identify themselves and to express their gender as they wish, while being protected against discrimination and hate.
Long-standing transgender advocate Gabrielle Landry in Hay River, Northwest Territories, says there's still work to be done in remote northern communities.
There is an awful lot of discrimination out there. People will look, but then they turn away. If you can educate people, then they might get an understanding of who you are, what you are.
Storm Lynn is Two-Spirit and a past NWT Pride president, who says outcomes from the transgender and non-binary census data need to be put under the direction of LGBTQ2S+ organizations.
Reach out to these already existing organizations and say, how can we help you versus this is how we're going to help you. Because the work is already getting done and the issues are already identified. So it'd be nice to see them kind of just reach out and say, how can we help?
Grandjam says it's important to recognize almost any time LGBTQ2S+ folks are required to fill out paperwork, there's going to be othering.
Well, if you definitely do sign the other box, people kind of look at you. People are curious, and some of them are a little ignorant, what do you mean other? What are you? When at the end of the day, it doesn't truly matter to them how you identify,
Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Coming up after the break, we're off to a film set in Manitoba. Stick around. Welcome back. A new CRAVE TV series is currently being filmed in Manitoba, and it features plenty of Indigenous cast and crew, as well as a ton of training opportunities. Our Daryl Stranger went on location to visit the set.
Action.
Production is underway on the new 6-part CRAVE series, A Little Bird, created by Jennifer Podemski and Hannah Moskovich in association with APTN and Resolution Pictures. Co-creator Jennifer Podemski gave a brief breakdown of what to expect.
It is about a woman who is searching for her birth family, originally born in Saskatchewan. She was raised in a Jewish family in Montreal, and on the eve of her engagement to a beautiful man, she decides to embark on a journey to find the truth of her past.
Award-winning filmmakers Elmaya Tailfeathers and Zoe Hopkins will each direct 3 episodes. The production of Little Bird is unique in that it features a training program for emerging and mid-career level Indigenous creators and crew, while also paving a path for entry-level individuals to gain practical on-set experience.
One of the realities is that we as Indigenous people represent such a low number of the workforce in the film industry, and that's due to a variety of reasons. But one of the things I think that's important to recognize is that training is a big part of building capacity, and in order to really make a place for ourselves in the industry, training is at the center of that effort.
Jamie Felix is one of the actors and crew members part of the training program. He says it's a great way to get an overall feel for the industry.
I know I'll be doing lighting, so I'll be learning about the lighting, and I'll see how all the cameras are set up. I'll be like in the back watching everybody do their work while I'm just like watching, right? So it's just I'm learning a little bit here and there, and then just by speaking with everybody on how do you do this, how do you do that, and they're teaching me a little bit there, and it's just like, oh, nice. And even knowing people too is like, oh, what do you do here? And then they're like, oh, I do this. And it's like, oh, okay, that's nice, man.
Filming is expected to wrap up this summer, and Little Bird is aimed for a release sometime in 2023. Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Calgary Stampede is just 2 months away. Tamara Pimentel met up with the newly crowned First Nations princess for the Stampede and brings us this story about Indigenous involvement in the event.
Being crowned the First Nations princess for the Calgary Stampede has always been a dream for Sikipanaki Lohorn.
When my name was called, I was very shocked. My late teens saw all these wonderful women be the princess, and being able to represent my family is what kind of attracted me to apply for the role.
A traditional dancer from Siksika Nation, the role as First Nations princess also makes Lohorn an ambassador for the Stampede, specifically for the teepee camp that has been occupied by Treaty 7 for generations. Her adopted grandparents have had their teepee here for as long as she can remember.
Being able to be the ambassador, I feel like there's not a lot of those opportunities for Indigenous people, especially in a city like Calgary. I think there definitely needs to be a lot more opportunities like this for Indigenous women and young Indigenous youth. Being the First Nations princess, I think it's an opportunity to share even more information and my culture, my ways, and family stories.
To become the First Nations princess, public speaking and cultural knowledge come into play, and Lohorn is a natural storyteller with a ton of background on the Stampede. The 27-year-old is currently attending the University of Calgary as a fine arts graduate student. She wrote her thesis on Blackfoot cowboys and their involvement in what is called the greatest show on earth. It started with founder Guy Wiedek.
Guy Wiedek really advocated for the Blackfoot people and the Treaty 7 people to be a part of the Stampede. He went out of his way to write letters to the government, talk to Indian agents, and he really allowed us that opportunity to leave the reserve and come into the city and participate.
From the teepee village to the rodeo, Treaty 7 now plays a major role in the Stampede. Leading up to the opening parade in July, Lohorn will attend events throughout the city along with Princess Jenna Peters. The pair will speak publicly, and Lohorn will have the chance to share her family's story. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
Pretty cool stuff. That is all the time we have for your APTN National News for this weekend. For news anytime, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.